Okay, we're back. You watched that short video, and it talked about how the Greeks thought myths and how myths helped build the Greek way of thinking. Um, so we're moving on here. We are now looking at period number six, some of the features of Hellenic Greece, which is is really kind of the meat of Greek history. So many traditions of Western civilization emerged visibly during this time, including literacy. So, what are some of the features of Hellenic Greece? And first is the return of literacy. The Greeks who were trading with the Phoenicians developed the alphabet. And the Phoenician alphabet is really the first writing system, and that's where we get the word phonics from. The Phoenicians lived in modern day where it is Lebanon and parts of Palestine, and their trade with Greece. And the Greeks came up with looked at this idea of writing and thought it was pretty cool. Well, the Greeks added something called vowels because in the Phoenician alphabet, like modern Arabic and Hebrew, had really no vowels or kind of implied. But the alphabet, which comes from the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha, which is A, and beta, which is B, that's where we get the word alphabet, and hence the song. The Greeks developed a way of living surrounded around what is called a city-state or a polis. Polis is the Greek word for the city-state. It's a self-governing city in the countryside around it. The word polis is where we get the word like metropolis or Annapolis, or even the word police or policy comes from the Greek words of civic life. Many different policies evolved in Hellenic period. They were not united, generally speaking, by any central government, but they shared common mythology, a common language, and they saw themselves as superior to the non-Greeks. But within this community of Greek policies, we have probably the two archetypical Greek policies, Athens and Sparta. And we're going to take a look at those moving here. So this is the civilization that emerged following the Dark Age around 800 BCE, reaching in kind of its pinnacle between 500 BC and 400 BC. And there's aspects of Western civilization that draw very heavily from both Athens, the birthplace of democracy, and Sparta, known for its famous warriors and strict military discipline. This is a picture of the ruins of the Acropolis, acro meaning high, polis meaning city. The Greek cities all developed around a high land that was easy to defend from pirates and marauders. But as the city grew and became more wealthy, the highest part was reserved for the most important temples and treasuries. The temple you see right there is the Parthenon, which was actually in pretty good shape till about 600 years ago, when warriors between Turkey and Venice, someone had stored gunpowder in the thing, and they struck and it blew a good part of the roof off. But this was a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, the patron goddess of the city of Athens, the goddess of wisdom. So there you go. That's the Parthenon, of course, which became the model for many pieces of classical architecture and wannabes like the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Here's a map of what a typical Greek city would look like. Right here is the Acropolis, which was usually the heart of the city on high. As the city grew larger, different features developed, including an agora, or a marketplace. It's a place where the Greeks came together to discuss issues of government, but also a place where they would trade. Most Greek cities worth their weight would have a theater because the Greeks were the first to perform drama. And the Greeks would celebrate human emotions and human experience through drama and song. Although the Greek drama was a bit different than the drama we're used to, but the idea of recreating the human experience through play was something that the Greeks gave us. Like most cities of the ancient world, there were walls around it. These are the walls here. And the Pyrrhian Gate was a gate that opened to the city of Piraeus, which was the seaport, which was about 20 miles away. Here's Athens, right down here. And you can see these are the Greek city-states during the Hellenic period. The core of Greek culture was the Greek peninsula and the Aegean Sea region, and most Greek cities faced the sea, as we'd said. Some of them formed colonies, particularly Athens, who were famous for their navies, and they would spread the influence of civilization, the Greek rule of civilization, into Italy and to Spain, which would be eventually adopted by the Romans. Early colonization would also be imitated on a much larger scale in early in modern history. The idea of taking people placing them in a land and subduing that land and then building and kind of transplanting your culture, just like the British tried to do in America and the Spanish tried to do and the Portuguese did in Latin America. It had a Roman precedent or a Greek precedent to it. So we looked at number 6. What are some of the features of Hellenic society? So we have the alphabet, city life. We talked about the architecture of a Greek city and the idea of colonization and spread and trade. Now, two different archetypes of Roman cities, Athens and Sparta. These two cities both saw themselves as Greek, which of course meant that they shared the Greek idea of superior civilization. Like many civilizations, they looked at foreigners as being barbarians. The word barbarian actually is a play on the word bar, which was the way the Greeks said that sheep talked, meaning that they were simply unthinking animals. Well, anyway, the Spartans had a society much different than those of their brothers 150 miles away in Athens. In Sparta, all male citizens were soldiers for life, but most males were not citizens because it was a slave society where 9 out of 10 people were state-owned slaves called helots. The Spartan way of life glorified a simple and tough living, and of course, if 9 out of 10 people were enslaved, you better have a prepared military. They put the group over the individual in ancient Sparta, and the discipline of the individual was really important. The Spartans had a very interesting myth of a young boy because they would start to train a soldier at 5 years old. 5 years old, you're out in the woods on survival training. Well, the story of this 5-year-old boy was he was on survival training and he stole a fox to prepare to eat from a farmer. When the farmer caught him, the boy hid the fox in his tunic and refused to give it up. And even as the fox chewed through the kid's body, the kid refused to cry out and get caught. So the idea of being caught was the issue here, and the fact that he would not kind of lose face by giving up the fox was a myth that the Spartans would use to kind of impart that idea on their children about being tough and being strong and being resourceful. There was a small community of merchants who carried on necessary trade, but the Spartans weren't given to a lot of trade or luxury. Their currency was large and bulky, and they discouraged trade and the idea of a simple, self-sufficient life. Women in Sparta had a relative degree of importance because they ran the household. Men lived together in camps and didn't get home very often. They would sneak home at night once in a while, of course, to have little Spartans. But aside from that, they were a society where the men up to the ages up to their 40s or 50s would live on the barracks. The Spartans were known to have little regard for arts and learning and things like oratory and speech. The word laconic, which means a person of few words, comes from Laconia, which is the land where Sparta was. The Spartan government was an oligarchy where the wealthiest people, not the wealthiest, but the high-born people and families would keep power. Now, Athens had a highly stratified society too, but they had a concept of citizenship and participatory democracy. That is very important because it is the Athens root of democracy that has drawn America. The idea that a citizen has a responsibility to vote, but in Athens that was only males and not slaves. But also, you had the right. The Athenians were the first to have juries. The idea that the law was maintained by people who swore to uphold the law and to listen to cases in juries. Slaves and women were excluded from participation, and women had few rights and weren't even really allowed out in the marketplace. Athens valued education and the arts. To the Athenian, the ideal person was physically strong and mentally and artistically strong. The idea of being well-rounded. So the athlete who could sing, who could dance, and could recite poetry would be the ideal issue. In ancient Greece, it was expected that all citizens participate in government. The term idiot, which we know today is a disparaging word, was used to refer to the Greek idea that a person who does not participate in government is idiotes, or an idiot. Where Sparta had its power and a strong and well-disciplined army, the power of Athens was in its powerful navy and colonies and trade, and that was where it got its wealth. And Athens developed principles of direct democracy where citizens were to meet regularly to decide on issues about going to war or peace. You could even vote to have someone removed from town if he was considered a danger. Now, whereas Athens and Sparta, again, we're looking at question 7, whereas Athens and Sparta had very different value systems, both respected the superior nature of Greek culture. They saw non-Greeks as barbarians. Their myth structures were relatively the same, although they had, like Athens, attributed more value to the god Athena. There were rivalries among the Greek cities, including Athens and Sparta, and every 4 years, according to tradition, to celebrate the gods at the base of Mount Olympus, the athletes of the cities of Greece would participate in the Olympics. And the athletes would represent the polis, sort of like how Olympic athletes today celebrate or represent the nation. And winning an Olympic event could make you very popular, in some cases, free meals for life if you won the Olympic Games and brought glory. So you weren't just wrestling or throwing the javelin or riding the chariot for yourself. You represented the city, just like a football team today, for example, might seem to represent the entire city. Both those cities would have to unite, though, when outside invaders like the Persians came in. Athens and Sparta worked together. So, what I'd like you to do right now is just take a moment and think. Western cultures have often idealized the histories of classical Greece and Rome. What aspects of ancient Athenian and Spartan life do you think we idealize today? So we'll stop here and take a moment on that collaborative thinking, and we'll get to question 8 once we get back.